Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this month's GRIDtalk. And this month, talking about process to playbook. So got quite a packed agenda, so there's quite a lot to work through. But this session is focused on the white paper that supports the kind of process to playbook journey that we've been helping clients on. Whilst if you're new to GRIDtalk, it's our way of just giving back and sharing best practice and knowledge on capability development. We run it monthly and we do a live event each year as well. And whilst I've got your attention, next session will be really at the end of April, and we're just going to give you insight into our product roadmap for 2025, look at the kind of new features that the team are working on, and a little bit of a tease. There's quite an exciting piece of R&D that we're looking at about helping you produce first drafts of your deliverables using the playbook, which we're quite excited about. But that is for next month. Right, process to playbook. So for this session, there's a supporting white paper. I'm not going to go through the white paper page by page, but just wanted to give you an overview of the kind of core concepts that we introduce into the white paper. And just to give you a bit of context, we introduced this concept of process to playbook, I'd probably say like July last year. And it was mainly triggered off a number of contacts, or a number of kind of conversations with clients and prospects about the kind of, I've written it all down, but if I'm honest, people don't use it, just sits on the shelf. I really struggle with getting people to be consistent in the way of working. And we had a few kind of large infrastructure organizations come with that challenge. Like, look, we spent a fortune writing it down. 6 months later, people just don't follow it, just easily ignored, not consistently followed. And we even had, like big professional services firms. One came to us and said, look, we've sold this piece of work to kind of design their project delivery system, but they're asking questions about, well, how are we actually going to translate this big 150-page PowerPoint manual and actually make it a reality? And so they kind of inquired with us. And then there's also the other grievance when we speak to people. It's, oh, well, I've kind of just committed us to a kind of massive investment in SharePoint and writing it all down. And then when we show them method grid, they're like, oh, if I'd known about that, I'd have probably changed my decision and sort of taken the conversation further. And obviously, it's massive frustration. And so things that we wanted to do really with the process to playbook white paper was to sort of explain, well, what are the traditional challenges you face with our traditional approach with process and knowledge management. So I'm going to spend sort of 30 minutes going through that short introduction on playbook, not too much really, and then time at the end just for Q&A, questions and answers, and feedback. So yeah, I thought I'd put a few comments that we hear when we do kind of discovery sessions with clients and just get feedback. But the kind of core comments we get, they're all there. It's kind of, we've written it all down, people can't find it, and even when they do find it, they don't follow it, or the kind of lack of clarity. The main feedback we get from teams is we're great at explaining what, but actually we do a really poor job on explaining how you do it. Sometimes people, and I've spoken to a few of them, just the frustration is that I've given up. How do I actually get people to be consistent? It's just a constant battle. Ones in the middle, people, can't even find it, don't know it exists. Some have sort of said the feedback is it's just too complicated. It's too theoretical. It's just not attached with delivery. It's just not real. It's just too abstract to be useful. One of the best phrases I had recently was the digital dust. Like, we're just literally, I'm just building, it's not just gathering dust on a shelf. It's just, a new modern way. It's just digital dust, just never accessed, never used. And you kind of get some of the other feedback is, yeah, reinventing the wheel. We just constantly struggle every time we start a new project. Just feels like we start from scratch. We're just not efficient. To the other ones, which is I'm really not confident in it. Our kind of ways of working looks great on a website, maybe good, comes across well in a bid proposal, but you scrape back a few layers, it's absolute chaos, in terms of how we actually do delivery, how we align different functions, different practices together. It's kind of more chaotic than actually well thought through and executed. And then the kind of reputation challenges. I mean, some clients will just recognize I'm dreading that call, and it's in those moments you kind of realize just the way that we've put things together and constructed it directly impacts the reputation we have with clients, but also pushes a massive amount of stress on the individuals and the teams themselves. And then I think everyone will deal with this challenge. You get the people that come in and say, look, we should do it my way. They just come in elbows out, and it's like, yeah, I know you've written it down, that's what you want me to do, but no, we're gonna do it my way. Or you get the other kind of commentary, oh well, yeah, it's too rigid, we can't tailor it, my client doesn't want to do it that way, so therefore it's not fit for purpose there, therefore it's kind of, we're doing it my way. And I think the kind of that's the reality. I would say most people we speak to, probably all of them will be like, yeah, we're either all of that or probably more pain points of kind of clarity, frustration, and processes not being followed and used. And I think I'll put it at the bottom there, the kind of definition of kind of insanity is just like, okay, well, if we do nothing about it, we're just going to expect the same behavior, same things that are going to happen. And it's kind of, I don't think there's a magic SharePoint site or a process map that's going to address those challenges. And that's really what we wanted to focus the kind of process to playbook sort of research on, is, well, why do humans, or why do your teams or humans or employees, why do they find it difficult? And then once you understand that problem, what can you do to make their lives easier, to improve consistency in ways of working? I'm not going to go through this. I think for those that have been through this process many a time, and if you're interested, I think I've done it on a number of grid talks as well. But the kind of common, we do this assessment when we speak to people, it's just understanding what the pain symptoms are and what the key challenges are. But I think everyone says, look, we recognize that we're inconsistent. Teams find it incredibly difficult to find the information they need when they need it. We're constantly reinventing the wheel. And our staff takes our staff a really long time to build their confidence and understand exactly how to work and how to be successful in our firm. And whilst we've written it all down, compliance is the big challenge. I just do not have confidence that people are following the process consistently. And I've got, apart from a gateway review, I'm pretty much on faith. So if you want to watch more of that, please watch some of the other grid talks we do. We do a bit more of a deep dive into that assessment process. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the kind of research that we do, I think the process to playbook is the kind of white paper that we wanted to focus on for this year. There's others in the series. I think that one of the most popular ones is how do you actually build world-class project delivery playbooks. And for this one, we also put out a few supporting articles from Method Grid about the white paper topics that are discussed. And look, appreciate if you don't follow us on LinkedIn, I really do encourage you to do so. We're not the type of firm that's going to send you endless emails asking you for your time. It's very much that we try and focus on the resources that help you. And then if that's of interest and you think we can help you, then it's really easy for you to come and talk to us. That's the kind of philosophy that we have in terms of our focus on research and papers that we produce. So overview of the white paper, it's kind of broken down into kind of two halves, which is, okay, well, let's first understand what are the traditional, if we understand the traditional approach that we take to how we write knowledge, process, and delivery, what are the kind of common problems that we experience, and just get under that in a bit more detail to understand what causes that problem with employees and with staff. And then obviously the second half is, okay, well, if you understand the problem and you recognize you want to do something about it, then we talk about, well, how playbooks are a good solution to address some of those challenges that we've gone through. But I don't really want to focus this session on playbooks. I'll let the white paper do that job. It's this session is really just to go through what are those traditional the sort of problems that we see with the traditional approach. The core ones is obviously, I'll go through them individually one by one, but organizational drift, I'll come on to and cover that. Talk about the kind of cognitive load problem that people have, a bit more of a deep dive on the shelfware trap, but then also kind of explore what's the impact on continuous improvement and innovation. And fundamentally, the last point, and this is a kind of key aspect that we always look at, is, well, what's the human psychology to ways of working? What's going on in the human mind that's going to influence them to adopt your ways of working? So we call it the human machine. And that kind of summarizes the kind of core problems, because once you understand what's going on in people's heads, you can then start to design solutions and systems that kind of influences their behavior. Okay, but the main focus is just, yeah, you understand the kind of problem, and then it just helps you kind of evaluate, well, how best could I solve that problem in my organization? Organizational drift, the kind of silent killer. So drift, I mean, I think it's a well-known concept, and I'm just going to explain it in detail. But essentially, you draw a line in the sand and say, look, this is kind of this is the standard that we want people to meet. And when you first start any business, or you start kind of own a function, you kind of like, I imagine this is how they do it. But actually, what I need to do is write it down so it's prescribed. And it's kind of like, how do we do stuff around here? That's kind of work imagined, and well, we've done it, prescribed, we've written it down, job done. Now, we've written it down, job done is one of the worst phrases that I absolutely despise. And I'm going to come on and explain why that type of thinking really does cause problems later on. But there's obviously a little bit of a difference between work imagined versus prescribed. We're always trying to do that shift on, as a leader, I lead the people and manage the process. But sometimes, that process isn't written down, it's not prescribed. And I just imagine that's how the team are working. I think they're doing their best. And work imagined is definitely the worse version that staff have to deal with. And you have to be quite responsive in terms of the kind of Jekyll and Hyde type of management. Look, if you get frustrated with your teams not being consistent in the way of delivery, but then you ask yourself, well, what have I put in place to help them be consistent? And if it's just work imagined, then it's more on me than it is on the team in terms of what I'm responsible for. But I think everyone in terms of organizations will put a line in the sand and say, look, this is our minimum standard that we want you to meet. But what we find, and it's kind of like we've got manuals, we've got standards, we've got SharePoint sites, pages, we've got e-learning and training resources that are helping people understand what that standard actually is. The problem though, and this is the problem we see with the traditional approach, is over time, there's a massive difference between how work is prescribed and versus how work is done. And we call that that drift, that's what we call organizational drift. I want you to meet this standard, but over time, work is done doesn't meet that standard. And it's not an overnight assessment. It's just over time, someone will be like, oh, well, we don't do it that way anymore. We don't do that. No, you can get away with that. You don't need to do that. And it's kind of death by 1,000 cuts. And really, drift isn't for, there are some processes that are just, you make a card payment, there's 0.1001% drift. It's just a standard transaction, happens all the time. Where we find drift, where drift really hurts, is when you've got complex processes all happening at the same time, across different functions, all that require human decisions to be made, that's when we start to see massive impact on drift. And traditionally, if you look at projects, that is what's going on in projects. You've got loads of different functions, loads of different teams, all making decisions on how to do things, but you are running multiple different processes. There's the business case, there's the planning, there's the solution, there's the design, there's the kind of health and safety assessment. All of that is going on simultaneously, and that's where it only takes a few of those processes to start going wrong or people being inconsistent that you then start to uncover and start to identify causes of drift. And that's the kind of key challenge with drift. Is it's like a death by a thousand cuts, really. At some point you'll start to say, oh, look, they didn't follow that process, but we got away with it. But as you go longer and longer on the project, those kind of hazards, those accumulations, they didn't do this, they didn't do that, we didn't notice that this happened, X, Y, Z. All of that is going to build up to a point where we say as work is done and hazard crossover. And the result of that is normally there is a critical failure event where the accumulation of hazards has created a massive impact on your project. Now, yes, some of those hazards might just be it's a huge amount of rework, massively impacted our schedule, massively impacted our budget, or in the most extreme cases, someone didn't go home. And that's the kind of core focus on drift. And the best way I phrase this is, look, you're always going to be managing drift in any organization. I use it with my team. If I notice that we've not done something, I'm like, guys, it's classic drift. That's the process, we didn't meet it, and this is the kind of result of it. But I use that phrase because I want the teams to recognize that, they understand drift, and I want to get drift to an acceptable level. And that's the kind of core focus. Is when I'm managing drift, I don't really want to be in that kind of below the line where it's kind of, if we drift that far, that's going to create critical failure. What we want to try and do is get drift into an acceptable level where we're improving it. I'm going to come on to the kind of innovation problem as well with drift. Sometimes people will find better ways of working. They'll innovate and they'll raise the standard as well. It's just being able to kind of manage that. And this, when I look at drift, this is the kind of what goes on in my head is, look, I think everyone, ideally, if it's a high value process that you own and you manage, and it's the kind of core of your business, you want to be, in the green zone. You want to be, look, we are meeting the standard consistently, and we're actually proactively finding ways to innovate it and improve it. I think in reality, if you ask most people, where I feel we are is I'm basically surfing kind of orange, like the kind of medium just above the kind of critical to quality angle. That's kind of where I feel the way that we're operating, and it's not really that comfortable in terms of a day-to-day running of the business, and it's incredibly stressful, and sometimes we drip into the red and we create critical failure. So the kind of managing drift is really for you to look at it and evaluate, right, how important is this process to me? Can I live with this process just being in the kind of orange amber, look, we're just managing drift and we're containing it? Or is this process critical to us, and actually no, we've got to find a way of optimizing that process to be into the green? I don't think anyone really will accept that, look, you can run a process that's in the red zone. But that's the kind of way that you kind of try and think about ways of working. And also, if you start to see frustrations or you look at events that are going wrong in your business, always try and say, look, is that a drift? What is this? Is that a classic drift problem? But the next thing that we explored is the kind of, we'll call it the cognitive load problem. Why less is more? And I think this picture tries to kind of summarize probably the reality of most employees in the majority of business. Is they walk into the organization and they have to build this mental picture of where everything is. Like where's our standards, where's our policy, where's the training, where's the where's the project methodologies over here, our investment processes over here, the procurement processes in this system. And I have to kind of, on a day-to-day basis, remember and recall that mental picture where all the kind of policy, all this information I need to be able to use to deliver projects, I have to build that mental picture. I also have another mental picture, which is how my project is looking. But then I also have this other, oh, well, where's all the information for me to be compliant? And look, people want to be compliant. They don't come into an office and go, oh, do you know what, I'm going to find a way of not doing something. People really want to do it, but I think they get massively frustrated when, you know, you try and get something done and someone turns around, oh, well, you didn't find it. You know, it's just over there in that SharePoint site, or no, it's not there anymore. It's over here. So, you know, you're not making my life any easier, and it's always the burden is on me to kind of find that information. Another challenge with this as well is people have different views of what that picture actually is. You know, if you ask two people, they'll be like, well, my picture looks like this and my picture looks like that. So when it comes to kind of people collaborating on ways of working, it's kind of like, well, oh, I didn't even know that existed. You know, a lot of that dialogue is what challenges teams to collaborate and improve ways of working. But also, you kind of, if you're not careful, like, you know, knowledge is power, but it can impact culture. You know, you kind of reward people because they've got a better picture of how things are all connected, and it kind of influences, well, I know more than you. It's kind of, that's really not the type of culture that I wanted to build in an organization. It's just really a systematic way of us failing the kind of basics of putting the right things in place for people. Now, one of the best things you can actually do, and I've seen some, I mean, some sort of webs of death is how I described it with a few clients, is look, create your map. You know, cognitive load, humans can probably deal with about 7 + 2 is the kind of calculation that we normally run. It's like 7 things in your kind of cognitive mind at one time. But when you think about it, if you're trying to draw that map of all the different systems and all the sources of knowledge and information that they need, I was like, I took 10 minutes just to kind of say, well, I think this is kind of the core processes that most people in project delivery are going to need to understand. They'll work on bids, there'll be case studies, there'll be delegations of authority, like who needs to approve and sign off what, the kind of contracts, the designs, lessons learned, there's my process, there's all the templates, there's the internal policies. I might have who are the experts that I need to speak to in the firm for how things get done. There's what we sell and how we sell it. And all of that, I was like, well, I need at some point in my working week, I need to access that information as I'm kind of executing the project lifecycle. And my advice is, I'm very happy to share, I think Tom and the team will share the kind of slides. First thing I would do is just, if you take half an hour, draw it out and just say, look, what does, if I'm a human being in the organization, like, just what are all the different sources and locations of information that I need to access, just to help me understand what's the cognitive load that you're putting on people in your organization. And one of the kind of key phrases that I don't like is, we've written it down, job done. And the reason I don't like it is, it's the mentality that we take sometimes, which is, well, I've written the standard, and I've built the template. I've job done. They should be following it. They should be using it. But we don't really think about what the human actually, the people in delivery actually, what they need. And it's kind of like, well, oh, I've spun up a new sustainability process and its templates. Or is that part of the project delivery method? No, that's a new SharePoint site that we've built. They have to go and access that information over there. Oh, okay. And then it's like, but we've done it. You know, we've written it down, so they should follow it. And then you move on. It's like, well, where's, you know, procurement have done the same, like investment have done the same. It's kind of, when you think about what's helping people navigate all the knowledge and information as you're trying to get through a project lifecycle, you're jumping and hopping around, and that's the kind of core problem with, I think, the mentality that people take, which is, well, I've written it down, you know, job done. They should be following it, and yet what we see is, well, we still experience high drift and low compliance to ways of working, simply because it's very difficult for people to remember where everything is. Normally I'll be a very simple question, and you read the room very quickly, is look, just tell me how complex is it in your organization. It gets a lot more complex, especially with some of the bigger organizations, when they've been acquiring firms and adding new firms in, and they've got their own ways of working, but your resources are kind of supposed to be shared across both businesses, and it's like, well, we've got this way of working, we've got that way of working. At that point in time, the natural thing, the natural conclusion, you're just going to have high drift until you address and solve that problem. Now, kind of this is the shelfware trap, and yeah, it's kind of our default response to failure. Hopefully everyone's kind of familiar with the kind of 3 lines of defense model. And quick summary is, look, first line of defense will be, look, we've written the process down, written what the standards are, and we expect the teams to follow that process and deliver projects in accordance with how we want them to work. That's kind of the first line. Second line then is, oh, well, actually, we want to put some checks and balances in there, the kind of governance and oversight within the organization. So things like PMO or like emergence of project controls functions are there to ensure that, yeah, teams are getting it right first time and acting as that kind of first barrier of control. And then the third line of defense is, okay, well, actually, I need something external that's not bound by a reporting structure, as an independent view and an assessment of the health of that project, that program, or whether you are compliant with the standards that you've put in place, and an audit assessment against those standards. I think what I find is the default that we take is, because the first line fail, we overinflate the second and third line. We need, teams aren't getting it right first time. Rather than look at the root cause, what we will do is, well, we want more checklists, we want more controls, we want more approvals, and we want more independent assurance on the process. Now, I'm not saying that you can get rid of lines 2 and 3. No organization can exist without kind of robust governance and controls, and the third line of defense is, the standard. All I'm suggesting is, look, if people don't get it right first time, yes, you can put controls in place to kind of control that risk, but fundamentally, if it's incredibly difficult for them to find the process, find the information, and it's a massive mental burden, then yeah, don't be surprised that you are going to get low compliance into ways of working. And therefore, rather than try and just inflate lines 2 and 3, just try and improve what you put in place to help people get it right first time, and rebalance your lines of defense. A sort of quick synopsis is, look, processes will always provide clarity, but what we find when they're kind of written in documentation, and it's kind of this process over here, this process over here, that document over there, and it's kind of a wildy navigation that you kind of have to find, and it's completely disconnected from delivery, you will find that you're going to have high drift, and that you will find that most of the issues that you're kind of have to resolve are caused by drift. And the second point is, and I think this is why I think the traditional approach that we take is, we've written it down, job done. And what it does is it places the burden on the individual to go and try and build that mental picture in their head to go and find all the information they need when they need it. Now, accessibility is a core challenge to that. Humans, we're always seeking the path of least resistance. I want something quick, I want something easy, and if it's not, I'm going to be frustrated with it. And that kind of behavior is, I couldn't find it, I looked for it everywhere, and then I just, do you know what, we'll just do it my way. Or I've got a template that I used on my old project, let's just use that one. And it might not be the quickest way, like theoretically you stopwatched it, but for the human they feel it is, and for the human they feel that they're in control of it. And that's the kind of core concept. Like I'd say the core thing that you're trying to meet with helping people be compliant to ways of working is how quickly you can get the information to them when they need it. And then, yeah, the shelfware trap is, look, if you live in a world that's plagued with kind of systematic high drift problems and critical failures, plus you look at kind of, well, we're not compliant with ways of working, your default response, like from leadership, will be, oh, well, we need more checks and balances, more controls. And if you're not careful, I mean, I kind of framed it as the kind of oil tanker, which is, we're a real slow to react, respond business. You know, we've got checklists for X, we've got checklists for Y. You know, if we want to innovate and improve this process, many people aren't very confident or comfortable with us adjusting the process because we have a real first line compliance problem. So a lot of this is trying to help you keep your business kind of responsive, agile, fleet of foot, and be able to respond to opportunities, but also, you know, to help you build processes and ways of working that actually help teams be compliant with it and get it right first time. Like CI and innovation are kind of the disconnected loop. So I think this is the kind of core challenge that most people face will be, look, I don't really have clarity on what the process is. It's all written down, but it's very difficult. I have to kind of string it together and work it all out. But the method and the ways of working is kind of over here in some kind of SharePoint site. And then there's the reality of what's going on in delivery. And there's a massive disconnect. Like when your kind of knowledge and process are massively disconnected from delivery, that is the core kind of, you want those two connected so that you learn from delivery and it influences how your kind of process and how your knowledge basically evolves. If they're disconnected, I probably guarantee it's very rare that you see incremental developments of ways of working. It probably feels more static, and you know what, we'll look at it every couple of years. We'll have a look at it and go, yeah, no, we haven't done X, Y. It's kind of triggered by that, rather than teams constantly breaking it, adjusting it, and improving it. And there's also a kind of core challenge that as you go through delivery and you go through assurance, teams will say, look, there's better ways of working. And you know, we kind of, the phrase I came up with it's a bit like flash innovation. It's a really, you know, someone in your team, someone who organizes it has found a smart way of doing something. And it could be, if we could scale that, we get massive amounts of benefit. If we could scale that across projects. Challenge is, well, what's the kind of thing you're going to use to provide that foundation that you're building on that's going to help you improve? It's like, if it's just, oh, well, maybe we'll write a new article, or we'll change the process standard, or we'll change that document, we'll update the SharePoint page. It's not really going to land, and it's not really going to get the momentum to be able to scale that innovation. It'll just be flash innovation, really good idea, but we just didn't have the systems in place to actually roll that out and scale it across all of our projects, or all of our processes. Just, it happened, but we couldn't actually raise the bar because we don't really, because delivery, knowledge, and method are slightly disconnected. Next point is the human machine, and it's kind of, I sort of said, yeah, why your team isn't following the manual is how I described it. And there's an article I put on LinkedIn, I think last year, about the kind of human machine. And a few of these things I've talked about, like the cognitive load problem is one of the kind of key challenges you're going to face. But the phrase I came up with, like, understanding the human machine, is pretty critical to help you understand how you get humans to be kind of consistent in ways of working. And the phrase I came up with was the lazy problem solver. And the theory of that is, look, humans are incredibly creative creatures. We love solving problems. We love designing solutions. You know, it's in our nature. It's one of our traits. That constant desire to look at a problem and how we solve it. But also we're lazy. You know, we're not. We're always trying to do things quickly. We're always trying to find, how can I get this thing done so I can do what I want to do? And that You know, the reason we're so innovative, the reason that we're sort of solve problems and like things that like give us more time back, is that we are driven by that. And it's when you think about designing ways of working for humans, like factor in the kind of lazy problem solver. Look, if it's going to take them more than 2 minutes to find something, I reckon you've lost them. You know, they will then default to, well, I need to take control of it. If it's too difficult, I'm just like, oh, it's too frustrating. So the critical thing we need to work on is it's the information they need when they need it to meet that basic kind of path of least resistance challenge. And if an old template on a project that was done 5-10 years ago is the quickest way that they think they'll get it done, they will default, because the thought of them trailing through a SharePoint site or trailing through a document and following 6 or 7 links to try and find it, they are going to get incredibly frustrated with it, and you will start to see drift from that behavior. The problem solver is also quite unique, and I think one of the best features we ever built in Method Grid was, yes, I can build a playbook, but then I can clone that playbook for every project and then give it to the team and say, look, I've given you 80%, I think, of what you need to do. They're the standards. That's what I need you to meet. But go and have a conversation with the client, and I want you to tailor that playbook, move it around, adjust it, right size it. But that's the way I want you to build the solution for how you solve that problem for the client. And being able to connect humans to, or anchoring them to the fact that they are using the kind of playbook as a way of them solution and designing the problem, and rather than it's kind of like I have a method statement and very rigid, kind of bit static, you need to write a document to tell me where you've tailored it and where you've right sized. That's probably not going to meet their basic solution exploring design feature. It's kind of like, how do I meet that distinctive trait that they really want to understand the problem and work out on a solution? And the kind of playbook concept we built for that primarily is built to kind of address that primary need in terms of the lazy problem solver. I'm going to switch to the other thing you kind of have to address is the fear index. You can watch for behavior signs, and when you're kind of explaining ways of working, they'll pull back, they don't want to touch it. A lot of things about when you want people to follow your way, you have to fundamentally understand, well, look, what is in place to help them take that step? It's very rarely their capability that's their problem. It's always going to be their experience and their confidence to give it a go. And when you kind of design methods, or you want to get consistent ways of working in, it's kind of, well, what can I do to influence that fear index so that they've got the confidence to do it my way or our way? And it can be as simple as, yes, training and learning are key to that. It could be, well, here are the top experts that you need to speak to. If you've never done it before, these are the 3 people in the firm that can help you do it. Or look, here's the template I want you to use, and here's 2 best practice examples. All I'm trying to do with those very simple techniques is just make them feel at ease so that they've got all the support they need in order to execute it. Because if they fear it and they're not going to be successful, or it's going to damage their reputation, they're going to default to what they know, and that what they know is what they did on their last project, and that might not be the way that you want them to operate. But be encouraged, because humans have a thirst to learn. Like, we love learning new skills, we love developing new skills. So they want to develop their experience, but again, how do you make it accessible and easy for them to build their confidence and acquire that skill set? The other point is came up this week. Everyone says humans hate change, and I think I kind of rephrased it. I said, I think humans love change. They love change that they're in control of, and especially if you think of like project management and all the kind of roles about the things that they have to do, they love kind of, if I've built this solution and I've designed it, it's mine, and they love the change that they're in control of. But it's about giving them the kind of tool sets and kits to help them explore that. But rather than make it kind of again, another mental picture of this is how I think I'm delivering it. How do you help them visualize that, and how do you help them communicate it so that it's completely transparent in terms of how they've configured and tailored ways of working for your organization? Cool. Like I said, I wasn't going to spend too much time on the kind of playbook concept, but essentially with Method Grid, what we've focused on is the kind of core concept of playbooks that help you connect knowledge, process, and delivery as an integrated solution for teams. So look, help me with that visual picture. These are all the kind of stages, controls, deliverables that we need to see as we go left to right on the life cycle, but very much merge knowledge and delivery. If this is what we need you to do, and this is what we need you to evidence, how you do it are side by side. And more recently with some of the advanced clients is, okay, if you want more experience or more training, then we can integrate e-learning into that playbook so that they can access the information, go down the rabbit hole, and build their confidence in how to do it. So I thought I'd try and run through that quite quickly, and then just give time for questions and thoughts at the end. So please, any questions or any feedback that you may have just about the kind of process to playbook journey. Sam, one from you, Sam. Has Method Grid seen the drift over time vary between industries and sectors? Are better, worse than others? Yeah, there are. I think there are different. I think there's different impacts to drift across some of the different industries and sectors we work in. Obviously, a lot of our clients are sort of capital project delivery, construction, and probably drift has a massive impact, but drift really, the focus is on health and safety and quality and making sure people go home safely. So there are some kind of things where actually drift, you cannot drift into the kind of critical quality area. I'd say in some other industries, like I think financial services, I think are a bit more chaotic. I think there's a big shift of, we used to do projects waterfall. We're trying to adopt agile ways of working, and actually you've got 3 different sets of people saying, oh, I think I'm agile, I think we're hybrid, and I think I'm kind of standard waterfall. I think a lot of that is just causing teams to be quite confused in ways of working, and again, that's spiraling, creating quite a few probably more chaotic in terms of ways of working. They're trying to work it out, but they're trying to work it out as they deliver the projects. Any other questions or feedback? In terms of the white paper, it'll be released shortly. I think it's just in its final brief. I think they're prepping the page for its release. I think the white paper does probably a better job and just obviously more detail about each of those core sections. But I mean, the reason, like I said at the start, the reason we produced it is, look, we want to help teams be consistent in delivery, and it's just helping you understand what is the human perspective of what and some of the challenges that you have to overcome in terms of communicating ways of working. Hi Neil, how critical do you think it is to have a stable playbook before you can maximize any benefits of AI? Yeah, no, I kind of phrased it before. I think we did a talk on innovation recently last year, and I was like, it's incredibly difficult to innovate on sand. You know, if you don't have like a core way of working, maybe you've written it down, but even though it's written down, it's in practice, it's not scaled and not used consistently. I think it can be very difficult for you then to kind of adopt standard ways of working, standard ways of using data, standard ways of using tools, because really you haven't got that type of scale and consistency in delivery. So I'd always say, look, address the kind of consistency process challenge, then it probably will make our lives easier in terms of adopting and finding opportunities to use AI to improve it. But I think there's a massive push on, I think so the other forums that are pushing data-driven project delivery and the use of AI. I think I'm always quite measured on that as kind of like, well, we want to use AI and analytics on like risks, lessons learned, but if the process itself is not consistently followed and adopted and used, I'm almost staring at a data quality issue and a data problem, which would limit the kind of intelligence AI can provide of looking at reports and looking at project data. I'm not saying it's an either or. I just think you have to have a balanced process in terms of, well, we want innovation, we want technology, we want data, but we also need to address the kind of process and compliance problem as well. Yeah, I mean, what was the one? The one that the use of AI, the one that we're quite excited about, which we're going to talk about next month, is we've been doing a few experiments with AI and documentation, and I think the bit we're interested in is, yes, you can use method grid to hold your templates, but can I click a button and can it help me draft the first version of my template using the kind of prompts and questions and information about your project that you want people to follow and answer? We think that's another way of unlocking productivity to help people. Andrew, other than visualizing processes and manually doing, does this provide any means to advise ways to optimize processes? Andrew, I think I'd say what I find is the greatest challenge when we've built playbooks for organizations is that kind of common problem, like we've written it down, job done. What we find is like one practice has written it down their way, another function's written it down their way, and I've got project management, I've got design management, QS, I've got different functions or different kind of consulting practices that have all sort of developed their way. But when you kind of join it up, I think there's that phrase, looks great on the website, you peel it back a few layers, it's absolute chaos. If we try and sell that and that together, basically we've got a job internally to do before we can actually take it to the client. So I think, I'm not sure that's kind of the level of optimization, but certainly first clarity on, look, how does this all join up about how we deliver sort of integrated solutions to clients. What I tend to find with playbooks, because if you can try and get your playbook connected with delivery, then that the team are going to break it, pull it apart, put it back together again. And it's going to always be on the cold face of delivery. Therefore, it's always going to, oh, by the way, we didn't do this here. We found a better way of doing this, and we improved this template. Or actually, we saw this new opportunity for us, and we built this new product that helped the client do X, Y, and Z. Because you're using the playbook to capture that information, you can then say, well, that's fantastic. Is that something we want to take back and make it into our kind of master playbook so that everyone benefits to it? And it's kind of that, I think the connection really is for people, which is, if I tell you, well, great, that's really good, write it in a SharePoint page, hopefully people will read it. I don't think many humans would be like, well, I'm not really vested in that. I just don't think it's going to have an impact. Whereas if they know that, look, what they improve, and if they improve it, everyone benefits, and the next time they get a project, it'll be on the master, and it'll be there for them. I think it helps them feel more connected and more invested in the kind of continuous improvement and innovation process. So I think probably the main thing really is to fix the connection between delivery and how your knowledge and your processes are connected to that and how they evolve. Any other questions or thoughts? Well, look, I thought it might take 50 minutes. A few bits more of information. Like I said, this deck will always go out, and there's some other links to some case studies, links to the other white papers. next month, just at the back end of April, we're going to do what are the kind of features that we've been working on. We've got a massive release that goes out on Sunday, fingers crossed, just make sure that it's all right. The reason we've been doing that release is to change the code set that we use to kind of help us with fast track the use of AI within the platform. And then so the kind of session in April is really just initial thoughts on some of the R&D, some of the kind of features that we're developing, and just give you visibility of that. And also, as always, kind of give us a little bit of feedback in terms of what we should build to help you get the most out of the platform. And it's a bit early to put it on, but thought I would do because it comes around very quickly. We're going to do GRIDtalk live this year. I think we're going to keep it in Bath. It went down really well last year. We're just going to bring it forward in the calendar. So we're going to try and do early July. So kind of a summer event. And that's, again, sharing sort of best practice, few client case studies on their implementations, and we'll do a deeper dive on the kind of features and roadmap to give you insights on how they're going to work. Cool. All right, well, thank you very much for giving me 50 minutes today. And yeah, hopefully see, I don't think I'm doing next week. I think it'll be Jodie and Rachel that we do next month, but I'll probably see you in May. All right, take care. Have a lovely week.